They wanted her out of Indiana, and someone just tried to make it happen. You think you know why Caitlin Clark could leave the Indiana Fever, but what you've been told is only half the story. There's a move happening behind the scenes right now that the league hoped you would never hear about. Welcome back, basketball family. Before I say another word, if you've been riding with this channel through every twist of the WNBA season, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, and drop a comment telling me where you stand on the biggest question in women's basketball. Does Caitlin Clark stay in Indiana, or is her time in a Fever jersey already running out? Because after everything I'm about to lay out for you today, you're going to have an opinion, and I want it in the comments. Stay with me all the way to the end, because the last thing I reveal will change how you see this entire situation. The rumor that refused to die. Let me start with something you need to understand. For months now, the basketball internet has been on fire with one name attached to one team that isn't her own, Caitlin Clark and the New York Liberty. Every few weeks, a new post surfaces, a new video drops. A new headline screams that the Liberty are coming for the biggest star in the game. And every single time, the rumor machine cranks up all over again. But here's the part nobody is telling you clearly enough. This rumor did not come from the Indiana Fever front office. It did not come from the Liberty front office. It did not come from Caitlin Clark's camp. It started the way most explosive rumors start in 2026. On social media, from an account that most people had never heard of before it posted something that changed the entire conversation around the WNBA. A social media account claimed that New York was eyeing Caitlin Clark in a potential trade with Indiana. And just like that, the storm was born. Now I want you to think about how fast that spread. Within days, fans were arguing, podcasts were debating, headlines were written, prediction markets were moving, and the strange part is, none of it was real. Not yet. But the fact that a single social media post could ripple across the entire sports world tells you everything you need to know about the power Caitlin Clark holds in this league right now. Why the rumors even made sense to people. Here's the part that most fans don't want to admit. The rumor caught fire because on the surface it made sense. And I need you to understand why. Because once you do, you'll see this whole situation differently. The 2026 season started uneven for Clark. That's the polite way to put it. After a year that was completely derailed by injuries. I'm talking a quad injury, a groin injury, an ankle injury that cost her all but 13 games last season. Clark came back to a team that looked different. Stephanie White had taken over as head coach, replacing the coach who was there before. And with a new coach came a new system, a new way of doing things, a new rhythm that everyone on that roster had to learn. Early in the season, Clark was still putting up numbers that would make any player in the world jealous, averaging better than 24 points a game through the opening stretch. But some fans and analysts started saying the same thing over and over. This new system isn't maximizing her. They argued that her playmaking, her scoring ability, her unique style of basketball wasn't being used the way it should be. And every time she had an off night, every time the Fever dropped a game they should have won, the conversation got louder. You add that to the fact that New York is sitting there with a loaded roster, and I mean loaded, and you've got the perfect conditions for a rumor to explode. You put Caitlin Clark on that Liberty team next to the kind of talent they already have, and you're not just building a contender, you're building a super team, the kind of team that doesn't lose for years. And that vision was so vivid, so exciting, so terrifying for the rest of the league that people just refused to let it go. But here's where I need you to pump the brakes with me, because what happened next is the most important part of this entire story. The firm denial nobody wanted to accept. When the Fever finally responded to all of this, they didn't leave any room for interpretation. A source close to the organization came out and said it plainly. There is no trade in the works. The Fever are not shopping their franchise player. In fact, the team spent the entire offseason doing the exact opposite. They fortified the guard room around Clark. They added pieces designed to make her life easier, to put more talent around her, to build a real contender with her as the centerpiece. That's what a team does when they're committed to a player. That's not what a team does when they're planning to ship her out. And look, the other side of this matters too. There's a reason the Fever denied this so forcefully, and it's not just about public relations. It's about money. It's about leverage. It's about the fact that Caitlin Clark isn't just a player to the Indiana Fever. She's the engine that drives everything. And when I show you what her contract situation actually looks like right now, you're going to understand exactly why this rumor never stood a chance. The contract you've never seen broken down. This is where I'm about to give you the information that changes the whole story. And stay with me, because this part gets genuinely fascinating. Back in April of this year, the Indiana Fever did something that should have killed every trade rumor on the spot. They picked up Caitlin Clark's fourth-year option. Now, for people who don't follow the business side of basketball, let me explain why that matters. Rookie-scale contracts in the WNBA are typically 3-year deals with a team option for a fourth year. That option had to be exercised before her third season, and the Fever did it without hesitation. That move officially locked Clark in through the 2027 season. But here's the part that really tells the story. Her salary right now is just over $500,000 for this season. And I know that number sounds small when you hear about the kind of money being thrown around in sports today. But there's a clause in the new collective bargaining agreement that changes everything. It's called the EPIC clause, exceptional players on initial contracts. And Caitlin Clark qualifies. Under this clause, Clark can renegotiate her fourth-year salary in 2027 and add an extension on top of it. And here's where it gets real. Because she earned all WNBA first-team honors in 2024, she's currently eligible to make up to the maximum salary, 17% of the team's cap toss in her fourth season. But if she wins MVP this season, she becomes eligible for the Supermax, 20% of the entire salary cap. And those extension years can be paid at the Supermax level too. Do you understand what I'm telling you? The Fever didn't just extend her. They structured a situation where Caitlin Clark's earning ceiling gets higher with every accolade she collects. They built her a financial reason to stay that gets bigger the better she plays. And get this, Indiana is the only team in the entire league with 2 players eligible for this kind of renegotiation. Her teammate, Aliyah Boston, already renegotiated her salary this season to $1 million, and she's scheduled to make the Supermax every year from 2027 through 2029. So let me ask you something. Does that sound like a franchise that's about to give up its biggest star? Does that sound like a team preparing for a goodbye? Because to me, it sounds like a team that just invested everything in a future with Caitlin Clark at the center of it, what the Liberty Super Team would actually mean. Now, let me play devil's advocate for a minute, because I know half of you watching are New York fans, and I know exactly what you're thinking. You're thinking about what that team would look like, and I'm not going to lie to you, it would be terrifying. You put Caitlin Clark in that Liberty backcourt, and suddenly you're talking about a team that could dominate this league for the next decade. The combination would instantly become the most talented, most dangerous roster the WNBA has ever seen. The marketing alone would be insane. The ratings would shatter records. It would be the kind of move that resets the entire balance of power in women's basketball overnight. But here's the thing about that fantasy that nobody wants to talk about. It was never more than a fantasy. Not a single credible report confirmed that the Liberty ever made an actual offer. Not a single team executive went on the record saying negotiations were happening. What we had was a social media post, a viral moment, and an entire sports world that got so caught up in the excitement of the idea that it forgot to check whether there was any truth behind it. And I want to be really clear with you here, because this is where a lot of channels stop being honest. All that talk about a multi-million-dollar offer from New York, never confirmed. All the talk about the commissioner being furious about backroom manipulation, never confirmed. All the talk about Clark being ready to pack her bags and force her way out? She came out and pushed back on those media narratives herself. That's what actually happened when Clark finally broke her silence. She pushed back. She made it clear that the stories being told about her weren't the reality she was living. And that brings me to the part of this story that is real, that is serious, and that should be getting 10 times more attention than any trade rumor ever did. The human being behind the jerseys. And now I need to talk about Caitlin Clark, the person, because I think in all of this noise, we keep forgetting that she's a 24-year-old human being navigating one of the most intense spotlights in sports history. After everything that happened, the physicality, the harassment, the threats, the constant debate about her every move, Clark finally opened up about what it's actually like to live this life. And what she said should stop every single one of us in our tracks. She said the harassment and the hate are not okay. She said that goes for opposing teams, for her teammates, for her coaches. And then she said something that I still think about. There should never be a question of character. She said she's always stood up and said that, and it's truly what she believes, because that's how she was raised. But here's the part that broke my heart. She said people sometimes think she's a robot, and she reminded everyone watching that she's not. She has emotions, she has feelings, and she admitted that it can be really difficult to go through a lot of what she goes through. She pointed out that she's 24 years old, trying to navigate a world she's been in for 4 years now. And she said there are times when it's hard, times when it probably affects her more than she lets on. I need you to really sit with that for a second, because while the entire sports world is arguing about her trade value and her next contract, and whether her new coach's system is maximizing her potential, Caitlin Clark is out there taking hits, watching the hate pile up, and trying to be a person in the middle of a storm that never ends. And there's another layer to this that a lot of people conveniently ignore. When that flagrant foul happened, when the suspension was handed down, the player who made the hit revealed that she and her family had been receiving threats and harassment online. Now, I'm going to say this clearly because it needs to be said. Nobody deserves threats. Nobody deserves harassment. Not Caitlin Clark, not the player who fouled her, not anybody. The fact that this has become a cycle of violence and hate on the court and off it is a problem that the entire league has failed to solve. And Clark herself said it best when she said she doesn't want anyone to ever experience that. That's the kind of person she is. Even in the middle of her own war, she's thinking about other people. What the numbers really say about the rumor. Now let me bring this back to the money, because I want to show you why the trade rumor was always going to die, and I want to do it with real numbers. The Fever exercised Clark's option. She's under contract through 2027. Her salary this season is around $528,000, and her team option for next season sits near $600,000. But thanks to that epic clause, that number is a floor, not a ceiling. If she wins MVP this year, she opens the door to 20% of the salary cap, not just in 2027, but potentially across extension years. Now compare that to what the rumor mill was claiming. There was all this talk about New York putting together an enormous offer to save her from a dysfunctional situation in Indiana. But here's the reality. You can't sign a player who isn't available, and Indiana just made it crystal clear she's not available. You can't trade for a player whose team has no interest in trading her, no matter how big your offer is. And you can't convince a player to force her way out when she's making more money by staying than she would anywhere else, and when her value increases with every trophy on her shelf. The business logic of the rumor never made sense, and I think deep down, everybody who pushed it knew that. But it was fun. It was exciting. It gave people something to argue about. And in a season where the actual basketball has been overshadowed by everything happening around it, maybe that's exactly why this rumor got so much oxygen. The race that actually matters. So if the trade rumor was never real, what is actually happening that should be commanding your attention? Let me tell you, because the real drama this season is unfolding on the court, and it's better than any rumor. The Fever built this roster around Clark with real intention. Aliyah Boston is locked in on a 4-year deal with that supermax money coming. Kelsey Mitchell is back. They added a rookie guard and a veteran forward. And the expectation? Contender. not participant, not "we're happy to be here." Contender. The pressure on this team to get it together and actually compete at the highest level is enormous, and everybody in that organization knows it. Meanwhile, the teams at the top are not going anywhere. The Las Vegas Aces won the championship in 2025, their third title in 4 seasons, and they didn't break up what was working. The New York Liberty are expected to be one of the best teams in the league again, with some of the most established chemistry in the sport. So the Fever's road to a title runs through the 2 scariest teams in basketball, and they're trying to walk that road with a superstar coming off an injury-ravaged season, a new coach, and a new system. That's the real story, not a trade, a climb. And here's the thing that makes it fascinating to watch. Every single game matters now. Because that MVP conversation isn't just about the trophy. It's about the supermax. It's about the difference between 17% of the cap and 20%. It's about the biggest contract of Caitlin Clark's life, and she has to earn it on the court this season. So every game, every three-pointer, every assist, every tough win against a contender, it's all building towards something bigger than a playoff run. It's building her financial future. Why this story isn't over now? I know what some of you are thinking because I've seen the comments. You're thinking, but what if the Fever struggle? What if they don't gel under the new system? What if the season goes sideways and suddenly the calculus changes? And I'm going to be honest with you, that's a fair question. Because the prediction markets actually took this rumor seriously enough to start pricing in outcomes. One report noted that odds makers and prediction markets suggested a certain team might be one to watch if the Fever ever did decide to move Clark. So, the infrastructure for a real trade conversation exists. It's just dormant. It's waiting for a trigger that may never come. But here's the thing about the trade talk that even the skeptics can't deny. It exposed something real about how the rest of the league views Indiana. When you hear other teams talking about Clark's situation, when you hear players around the league weighing in, you realize that everyone is watching. Everyone knows how valuable she is. And everyone is waiting to see if Indiana can build a winner around her fast enough, because generational talents don't wait forever. They want to win, and they want to win now. That's the suspense that's hanging over this entire season. Not a trade that's happening, a trade that could happen if things go wrong. And that possibility, however distant, is what's going to keep every Fever game must-watch television for the rest of the year. The bigger picture nobody's talking about. And now I want to zoom out, because there's something even bigger here that connects everything together. This isn't just a story about one player and one team. This is a story about the entire WNBA at a crossroads. Think about what Caitlin Clark has done for this league. She's the face of it. 11 lawmakers literally described her that way in that letter, the face of the league. She's the reason television ratings are up. She's the reason corporate sponsors are lining up. She's the reason kids are wearing jerseys and dreaming of playing in the WNBA. And when you have a player of that magnitude, every single decision, every trade rumor, every contract negotiation, every controversial call becomes a league-wide event. The league office is dealing with an online harassment crisis that it still hasn't figured out how to solve. The officiating is under constant fire, with coaches and players across the league calling for more consistency and more control over physicality. And now, there are lawmakers in Washington asking pointed questions about whether the league is doing enough to protect its most important player. That's not a small story. That's a story that could shape the future of how the WNBA operates. And here's the part that connects it all back to Clark. She's been handling all of it with a grace that most people couldn't muster. She's been the face of the sport, the target of its violence, the subject of its rumors, and the voice of reason in its darkest moments. She said the hate is not okay, and she meant it for everyone. She said nobody should experience that, and she meant it for her rivals too. That's leadership. That's the kind of player you build a franchise around. Stay with me. One more thing. Now, I told you at the beginning that I'd leave the most important thing for the end, and here it is. So listen close, Because this is where the whole picture clicks into place. Every single rumor you've heard about Caitlin Clark leaving Indiana, the Liberty offer, the broken relationship, the commissioner's fury, the fake injury reports, every single one of those stories was either unverified speculation or completely fabricated. And that's the part that should bother you more than anything. Because the people spreading those stories weren't just wrong. They were telling a story that hurt real people. They were telling a story that made it seem like the league's biggest star was being abused by her own organization, when the reality is that she's under contract, she's protected by her team, and she's one MVP season away from the biggest contract in the history of her sport. But here's what is real. The hits are real. The harassment is real. The pressure is real. The injuries that cost her most of last season are real. And the burden of being the face of a league at its most explosive moment of growth is real. Caitlin Clark is carrying all of it at 24 years old, and she's doing it while people argue about where she should be playing. So here's my question to you, and I want real answers in the comments. When you think about what Caitlin Clark has been through this season, the physicality, the hate, the rumors, the pressure, what do you think matters more for her future? The money and the market, the team around her, or her own peace of mind? I've seen every kind of take on this, and I genuinely want to know where you land. Drop it in the comments. I read them every day, and some of the best conversations on this channel start with a single comment from someone like you. And while you're down there, if this video gave you something to think about, if it broke down the story in a way you hadn't seen before, do me a favor and hit that like button. It takes 1 second, and it helps more basketball fans find this content. And if you're not subscribed yet, this is your moment. Subscribe, turn on the notifications, because I'm going to be following this story every step of the way, and you do not want to miss what happens next. The season ahead. Because here's the truth about what happens next, and it's why I said this story isn't over. The season is still young. The Fever are still finding their identity under a new coach. Clark is still working her way back to that untouchable form after everything her body went through last year. And every game between now and the end of the season is going to tell us something about which direction this franchise is really heading. If the Fever rise, if they click, if Clark plays like the MVP candidate she's capable of being and drags this team into contention, then the trade talk dies for good. The contract gets signed, the Supermax gets unlocked, and Indiana celebrates the fact that they never let go of the most important player in franchise history. But if the Fever stumble, if the system never clicks, if the struggles turn into a pattern and the playoff hopes start to fade, then that dormant rumor machine wakes up again, and next time it might not be a social media post. It might be a real conversation, and that's the terrifying, exciting, unpredictable reality of where we stand right now. That's what makes this season appointment viewing, not because a trade is coming, because the possibility is alive, because every Fever game is now a chapter in a story where the ending hasn't been written yet, and the pen is in Caitlin Clark's hands. Until next time, so here we are. The trade rumors blew through the league like a storm, rattled every conversation, and then came up against one immovable fact. Caitlin Clark isn't going anywhere, not because she's trapped, because she's invested, because Indiana invested in her, because the future being built in that franchise is one she wants to be part of, and one that gets richer with every win she stacks up this season. But the bigger fight isn't over. The fight to protect her on the court isn't over. The fight against the hate off the court isn't over, and the fight to turn this Fever team into a real contender is only just beginning. Caitlin Clark came back from a season that nearly broke her body into a season that tried to break her spirit, and she's still standing. She's still playing. She's still the face of the game. And that right there is why this is bigger than basketball, because when you watch Caitlin Clark play, you're watching somebody who refuses to be defined by the noise, the rumors, the hits, the hate. None of it stops her, and that's the real reason every single person in this league, every team, every executive, every fan is watching her every move. The next chapter of this story could be written tonight, tomorrow, next week, And when it happens, I'll be right here covering it. The question is, will you be here too? If you've made it this far, you already know the answer. Subscribe, stay locked in, and keep your eyes on number 22. Because the biggest story in women's basketball isn't over. It's just getting started. Support this channel if today's breakdown gave you something to think about. Share this video with a fellow Hoops fan who still believes the trade rumors and let them know what's actually happening. Sports are always better when we're digging for the truth together. Thanks for riding with me all the way to the end. Take care of yourselves, keep your passion for the game alive, and remember, the next update could change everything. I'll see you in the next one.